back to my channel. My name is David. Today we are going to continue our restaurant project with Next.js. In the previous session, we have finalized this booking form with all the booking form validations, and we are making a post request to the backend API. So in today's session, we are going to continue the project by keep building this testimonial section and also the gallery, the chef, and also the contact section, including the footer. One of the highlights of our today's session is going to be the navigation link. As you can see, whichever navigation you click on, that'll take you to that section area without affecting the routes, all right? And also you could see the color changes animations. Whichever the section it goes, the color of that navigation changes accordingly to the theme color. This is all being handled by the backend JavaScript, all right? So in today's session, I'm going to show you all these cool stuffs. If you're interested, please subscribe my channel, and let's jump in and do it right now. So back to our code editor, what we're going to do first is in our section folder, we create a new file, and that file is going to be called Testimonials.tsx. We're using TypeScript, by the way, and hit enter RFC so we can have a boilerplate. And also at the same time, we create another file also called Testimonials.css. Hit enter. So we're going to import that CSS file back to our component file. So then // basically means it's in the same folder, testimonial.css. All right, nothing's done. So these two files are now linked together. And if you think about it, to do the testimonial, it's going to be in the Swiper. We have done a Swiper in the previous session for the events section, right? So this is pretty much going to be very similar stuff. However, if you look at it, we do need to build a separate component, which is the card that holds each testimonial item, right? So we need an individual child component to hold the testimonial item. So let's just go back to the code editor and also go into our component to build another component file called testimonial items, all right? So that's going to be testimonial item.tsx. So this one is going to be used to hold our child component of each individual item. So that's the one. And also in the component folder, I'm just going to slightly expand this so you can see it clearly. And another new file called testimonial item singular.css. So that one is the CSS styling file. To make things work, we have to link these two together. So import testimonial item.css. So now these two files are combined together, and the remaining job is just to build these things. So let's start it from the item first, because if you think about it, once you finalize this swiper, you're going to map the slide data into this individual testimonial item, all right? So we must have this child component first before we do the data mapping from the parent component. All right, so let's start it from the testimonial items. That's my habit. Some developers prefer to do it from the parent component, and once they reach to the child component, it'll create that files and start to build a child component, which is also okay. So what you do is up to you. Both way works, right? So I just want things to be ready when we are going to use it. So that's why I started from the child component. So in the testimonial items, just to think about how many things we need for that child component. Have a look here. We're going to need a content for that testimonial itself, and also we're going to need a profile, which is an avatar image, and also the person's name who left this testimonial, the title of that person. So there's a couple of data points, right? So in our child component, we're going to have to set up this a property value to reflect those. And we know that when the parent component do the data mapping, it's going to inject a property value, and that's going to be an object. So I say here that's going to be an item. We have done this one many times in the previous session. So this is pretty much just going to be a repeating practice for you to do. And second things to do is going to define the data type of this item variable. Because we are using TypeScript, if you're using JavaScript, this won't be necessary. The JavaScript, only you need to do is a JavaScript object destructuring over here, and that's it. Because we are using TypeScript, this is going to be a more accurate programming language based upon the JavaScript. So that's why you need all of these. For each item, we're going to have a ID property, which is a number, a content, which is a string, the avatar that contains the image routes, so it's also going to be a string, and a client, the name of the client is string, position is a string. All right, so you just have to clearly define all of this data type. And the next thing to do is to create our template, our UI template, to hold each individual item object, and give the parentheses, and like that. So we create a class name called testimonial item. That's going to be a singular. And also for each one, we're going to load the content. We're going to load the image avatar, which is the routes, put it over here, and also show the customer name. And also if you want to show the title, the last one, the position, and that is going to be, let's just say, we can say item.title. So just give the last one, the position, sorry. An example, that's how you can access each individual property of that item object. All right, so our child component is pretty much done. The next job is to put in our CSS, so it will look better when we turn it on. And let me just quickly copy over all of these. As you could see, for each item, we want it to be a content box. Give the minimum height. It can go larger, but at the minimum, we want it to be 320 pixels. And also for each image, that's going to be the avatar. We want it to be in the border radius 50% to make it a circle, and also place at the proper position. For the title, we want to make sure it looks larger. The subtitle, the person's name, we want to give them a different font size, right? So that's pretty much all the things we're going to be handling. All right, so that's all done. And once we've done that, the next part is going to be our parent component. And if you think about it in the parent component, what we're going to do here? What we're going to do is to set up another swiper. So I have told you how to put in the swiper all of those imports and the third-party libraries, how to link those together in the previous event section. So here we're just going to do another practice. It's going to be slightly different for this one because the previous one, each slice takes the whole width of the screen, as you can see, right? But here, the slice is going to be changed according to the size of the screen. On the full-size screen, it's going to show 3. On the mobile side, it's only going to show 1 testimonial card at a time. All right, so that's going to be the difference. So now let's just come back here. So we're going to import quite a few things. Firstly, we know that there's going to be a lot of state handling in this parent component. So I'm going to import the use state hook and also the use effect hook. Oops, I broke it up, my bad. So that's the first thing. And the second thing I'm going to do is to import all of those swipers, third-party things, because we are importing quite a lot of modules from the swiper, which is going to swiper itself and swiper slice. That's 2 predefined components by React Swiper already. And we're going to import the default CSS for swiper, the pagination. The pagination is pretty much means this bullet point here. And also we know that this thing is going to have the autoplay features, so we import that autoplay and the pagination modules from the swiper as well. A very good habit is to put your customized CSS at the end. So if anything that you want to override the default setting of the swiper, your customized CSS file will do so. All right. If you put it above, the swiper will override your customized stuff. All right. So that's the thing. And once that's all done, the next job is going to be the data importation. All right. We need to fetch data somewhere. But if you look at it, if you watch my previous few sessions, you will know that all of our data is going to be created from this API folder. This is the place that we build our backend, right? So far, we haven't created a file for our testimonial yet. So what I'm going to do is going to create a new folder inside our API and call it testimonial. And that's all. And inside this folder, I'm going to create a new route.ts, and that's going to be our backend file, right? Because inside this backend file, we're going to create a route which allows the user to fetch the JSON data. And where the data come from? Ideally, you're supposed to have some database to store those static data or dynamic data, and so you can create a connection to the database and then make the a select request, make the select statement from the database, or using MongoDB, you can do a find statement from the MongoDB database. However, because we are doing a simple project, all the data for this project are stored in this data file. So to make things simple, we're gonna use this data file as our database, right? So and from our routes file, which is our backend API, we're gonna call and import the data over here. Okay, so just to make things simpler. In the future project, I will show you how to set up the connections with the database and also talk with the database. But that's gonna be more like a backend project instead of a front end. All right, so we'll focus on one side over the other, and for the Next.js project, we still focus on the front end more than the back end, right? So if you want to learn the back end, just keep watching my channel. In a future video, I will upload few more courses, focus more on the back end, but our front end won't be that complicated. Otherwise, this is going to be a super long video and it might confuse you in the end. So over here, what I want to do is going to have our testimonial data ready for importation. So what I'm gonna do is to, let's see if we haven't done it before. No. So just after the bookings, so just copy and paste in, export a testimonial data which comes in as a JavaScript array that contains as the JavaScript object with all the person's title, the name, and also the image routes. Okay, so that's our database. And now in our backend routes, what we're gonna do is just going to import our testimonial data first from the data file over here. This is like the connection to the database. And then the next thing is to create a route to handle a GET request. So whenever the user makes a GET request to our backend, we're going to return with the response .json. That means that we're going to convert all of our testimonial data into JSON format and deliver it on the browser. All right, so we've done that. Let's just go to the local host 3001 to see if it's working. So that's our previous session. Let's see if we go to testimonial. Testimonials, yeah, it looks perfectly fine. So that's our API endpoint routes, localhost 3001/API/testimonials, which contains all the 5 elements, all 5 data sets that we want to deliver. It looks all beautiful, but if you JSON looks different from this styling, you can just add a Google extension that is called JSON Viewer. Once you add it to your Google browser, Chrome, this thing will look much nicer. All right. So now we have the testimonial data, and we're back to our code editor. Basically means that our GET request is working now. Okay. So our data is done, our route is done. Now we are back to our parent component. The next job is to do the data fetching. And if you think about it, are we building these testimonials as a client component or the server component? In the previous session, we have illustrated the differences between the two, where the client component allows you to enable more interactions with the user, while the server components, the user is pretty much cannot interact with the DOM elements. All the data has been rendered on the server side. Because we are using this use state and use effect hook, there must be some interactions with the user. So we're going to build this one as a client component. Before it pops up with any error, what I'm going to do is going to define this component as a client component just by stating use client at the top. All right. So that thing is done. And the next part, what we're going to do is to create a local state variable to store all of our slides data once we fetch it from the backend. And that is going to be called slides with a plural. And we know that it's going to be an empty array initially. So once the data ready, this empty array is going to load our JSON array data, which is this one on the backend. Okay. And the next thing, I'm going to create our get testimonial function, which is the function to fetch data from the backend. As you could see, we are targeting at this routes, so we are fetching from the localhost 3001/API/testimonials, which is exactly this one we are looking at. And also, once it's done, we're going to convert this JSON data into a JavaScript, and then we're going to set our local state variable slides to the data that we fetched from the backend. If we catch any errors, we're going to log out that error. Okay, and that's the functions. To trigger this function, what we're going to do is whenever this section component gets mounted on the browser, we're going to trigger this function. And we know that the use effect hook is going to handle the DOM mounting stuff, right? So when the components get mounted, the use effect hook is going to work, and whatever you put inside, that thing is going to be worked as well. So we put this function at the time of mounting to call it. So it looks like the things are all done. And the next part is just for me to put in all of those section template code and explain it to you. It's going to be a very standard one, like that. So firstly, we're going to create a section and give the ID of testimonials, and the same as the class name. And we know that everything is going to be wrapped inside a container because we are using Bootstrap 5 in this project. And the first thing we're going to do is to import a section title. As you could see, every section has this default looking of the section title. They all look very similar, just with different names. All right. So we built this component inside our component folder already. If you haven't watched my previous video, that's where it is. The section inside our component folder. We have this section title component built in the previous 1 or 2 sections. So I'm just going to import this again into this project. As you could see, the section title gets imported over here. So now you can use it. Just give a proper name, give it a subtitle, and now this component will be working. The most important things for this parent component is the swiper. First, we're going to import this swiper component from the default component provided by a Swiper React. And then we're going to define all the properties of it. It's going to be an autoplay with a speed of 600. Autoplay, the pace is going to be a half second. With the pagination, we're going to find the element with a class name of testimonials, swiper, and pagination. We're going to find this class name and handle it. It's going to be the bullet point. It's clickable. It's going to be true, right? And we know that for this swiper, we are using the module of autoplay because we want to have an image carousel. And also we want to use the model pagination for this reason. The breakpoint is something different. We haven't done so in the previous swiper, and that is because the previous swiper only contains 1 slide at a time. But if you look at this one, it actually contains 3 slides at a time. But depending on the screen size, if you're on the medium screen, it's probably showing 2 at a time. If you're on the mobile screen, it's probably only showing 1 slide at a time. All right, it's up to the screen size. That's why I set up the breakpoint to define if it's on the 320 pixels, I'm going to show 1 slide at a time. If it's on the 1200, showing 3 at a time, and also give them a space between each slide card. Okay, so the class name of the swiper is going to be this one. And now it's come to the most important part, which is the data mapping. We know that from the data fetching function, we have a set the local state variable slice to the data that we fetch from the backend, this one. And now in the code editor, we're just going to check if the slice data is ready. If it's ready, if the length is going to be greater than 0. If it's greater than 0, that basically means we have the object inside it. It's not an empty array. All right. And once it's confirmed, we're going to do the mapping, map each slice into a singular slide with all of those object property data type predefined. And we know that each slide is going to be in a template of a swiper slide, which wraps our testimonials item. The testimonial item is going to be this template that we have pre-built initially. Okay, so now because it's showing an error line, that's because I haven't imported. This is the beauty when you're using the TypeScript. It'll always remind you with all those errors. The JavaScript is sometimes don't have this reminder. And now we have imported that testimonials item, which is this one. And we know that this one is going to take the property called item. That's why we pass in this item as a property with the value of the slide. All right. So the slide contains all of this kind of stuff, and in the child component we can access all of these things. All right. So that's the logic. And last but not least, it's going to be our pagination. So this thing, the testimonial swiper pagination, the class name, must match the selector over here for the pagination property inside your swiper. Otherwise, you won't find it. Your CSS is not going to work. Okay, so that's all the logic. One more last thing is to put in our parent component testimonial CSS, so it will look much decent and nicer. So like so. We're going to define the paginations looking, at the bullet points looking, and also when the bullet point is on active, we're going to show it in the same color. It's pretty much targeting at our pagination bullet point. Somebody say that, can I wrap this thing into a separate component and name it testimonial pagination? You absolutely can. All right, just inside your component folder, wrap this thing into that file and also put the CSS into that file as well. So this thing can be isolated and it becomes reusable as well. If later on you have another place that you want to use the pagination, you can absolutely use it. All right, but for simplicity, I just put it like that over there. So now we've done all the things. So hopefully this thing is going to be working. Let's go back to our home page and put in that testimonial, link in that testimonial component section. So testimonials, we link that in. As you can see, this thing has been successfully imported from the sections folder, which is correct. And then we go to our class to see, cannot solve that problem. Maybe that's going to be a typo that I made. Let me just double check over here. Import from /test or testimonial. I did make a mistake. So going back there. It's not this one. Oh, it's the testimonial items. Yeah, looks like here I'm missing a T. So let's resave it. Yeah, it's reloading. Now things is working. Just a simple typo. I fixed it real quick. So now you can see this thing's autoplay. I put my mouse over here and let it run for a while. So it's going to play the next one on and on and on. But we have 5 elements inside this array. Each time it's only going to present 3 of them. All right, it's not going to present all of them. That's why we define on a large screen, we're gonna display 3 at a time. And also it's swipeable. If you put your mouse there and you just drag it, use your mouse, it's swipeable. And if the user is using the mobile phone, which is a screen touch, they can also swipe this thing with their finger, right? Really, really cool. So now we have our testimonial section finalized. And the next section we're going to build, let me have a look, which is going to be our fancy, cool, and most attractive gallery section. Let's just do it right now. To build a gallery section, what we're first going to do is inside our section folder, create a new file called gallery.tsx. And then the first letter should be in capital, because that's the naming convention. For the component file, we normally put a capital letter for the first one. So RFC to create a boilerplate. And then we know that if you look at this gallery, the entire gallery contains all different kind of images, right? So each image is going to be in a gallery item. And in Next.js, we're going to have to create it as a child component. The entire section is going to wrap that section child component. And once we click on those things, you can see this image gets popped out. And then you can browse all them through by clicking this arrow button. Going back, this is achieved by using a third-party library called GlightBox, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Right? So we know the design logic. We need to create a child component for the gallery, which is called gallery item, and then do the data mapping in the parent component. It's the same logic, right? So now back here, going to the component folder, we'll create a new file and call it gallery item.tsx RFC, and then also gallery item.css to create that starting file. And I just want to import that file back. So import /gallery item.css. So that thing gets imported back. And inside this gallery item, the job of it is going to take whatever the property value gets injected from the parent component, because the data mapping happens in the parent component, right? So it certainly is going to take one property, and that is going to be called item. We do an object structuring here, and then colon. The next job is going to define that data type for that item. And to think about it, it must have a number. Must have a number type of data for the ID. And then the second one is going to load that image. So the image is going to be a string. How do I know this? If you look at that, so each gallery item is going to be the routes of that image, right? So we must have this property to hold that image routes. And then we need to assign an ID to make them unique to each other. So, right? So that's 2 things done. And the remaining job is just going to be quite simple, which is to load that image inside this gallery item template. So what I'm going to do is just quickly put in our template, delete this one, give it parentheses, and like so. So it's going to be the 3-column things. On the middle screen, it's going to be the 4-column things. This is a Bootstrap class name, and inside it, we're going to have the gallery item, which is going to have an anchor tag that shows the image. Routes. This is designed for that GlightBox. I'll show you how to load it. The component below is going to be an image component. This one, you don't have to build it. This is the default Next.js image component. If you just import it, and right above, you will see this image component gets loaded over here. Okay, and to use the Next.js image component, you have to define the width and height, and you can define the style over here, and then you just need to give the source of that image over here. Right, it's quite simple to use. The reason why I'm using this Next.js image component instead of the HTML one, because I could also use this one, right? So this one is the same as this one. The only difference is, or the biggest difference is this image component with Next.js allows lazy loading, right? Because we are building this one on our local host, you don't get to see the image loaded at the slow space, right? But just imagine that this image is going to be provided from the online disk or some cloud driver. It's probably going to take a few seconds to load this image. Without lazy loading, your application will be just crashed over there or pending over there. It looks pretty ugly. And now with the lazy loading, so gradually load this one progressively, maybe showing only a part of it, another part of it, but it allows your application to run smoothly, right? That's why I inject this Next.js image component over here. Okay, and the next thing I want to do is the GlightBox. The GlightBox, we're going to firstly import it because we have installed in the very beginning of the lecture video. So we imported the GlightBox, and then we know that we're going to use the use effect hook to trigger this GlightBox. So I'm going to put in that use effect hook, and then down here, just above that return, we put in here. So use effect hook. When this item component gets mounted, we're going to create a new GlightBox with a selector of that one. That's the class name of your gallery item. So if you look down here, it says gallery lightbox with a class name, and that has to be the same as this one for the GlightBox to work. Alright, it's quite simple to use. You don't have to worry about all the CSS. It saves you a huge amount of time to do the Modal and also to do all kinds of the video Modal or the image Modal or the carousels. It saves you a huge amount of time. Really handy to use. Okay, so we have that thing done. And the next thing, going back to our parents component, this thing's going to be very easy. Oh, I forgot to put in the gallery item CSS. It's just a few lines of code. I leave it to you to read. It's quite simple. Not hard at all, except for this one, the image. When it's on hover, we're going to scale it to 1.1. This is like a zoom in effect. Okay, that's the only highlights for the image item. And that's done. And back to our parents component, we know that we're now ready to do the data fetching, but we haven't even built our backend API endpoint yet. So what I'm going to do is go into our data file, and now I want to import the data for our gallery. So it's like working as our database. So what I'm going to do is to copy and paste in this one. It's a quite simple data structure with the ID and image routes only. Because if you look at our gallery item, each item only contains the ID and image routes. Right? It has to match up. This is the gradient of the TypeScript. And once we've done that, we also need to go to the API folder to create a new folder called a gallery, and that is going to be used to hold our endpoint routes. So a new file must be created inside it called routes.ts, and then we know that in this file we are going to import our static data from our data file. This is going to be used as our database, and then we do a JSON response to respond that data onto our API endpoint. So once it's done, if you go into our routes and then /API, I delete that /gallery. Hopefully, yeah, you get to see the API endpoint of that gallery data that shows in a JSON format. So the next job is going to make the GET request from these routes and then get all of this data to do the data mapping. right? So we close off this one and also the data one. You don't need to worry about the data file because all the data has been provided down the link in the description for free. And back to our parents component. So we know that we are going to load this thing as a user client component. So because we are going to use the state hook and also the use effect hook, and so for that specific reason, I need to tell Next.js it's going to be in a use client component. So that two things is done, and then we're going to create a local state variable to load all the data that we fetched from the backend, and we call it images and set images. Initially, it's going to be an empty array. Once we do the data fetching, it's going to be loaded fully. All right. So now we write our data fetching function. We're going to fetch from the API endpoint that we just created, this one, and that's a GET request. We fetch data from localhost 3001/API/gallery. Once we've done the data, we convert it into JavaScript. We set our local images variable into that data that we fetch from the backend. And this function need to be called when this gallery section gets mounted. So we use that use effect hook to trigger this function. So all the preparation job is done now, and the remaining things are going to be quite easy because I'm just going to put in the template, the section template, to hold all of this data. So I'm going to give it the parentheses, put in this. As you could see, again, every section includes the section title, and this one as well. Because we have pre-built the section title component, we could simply import it, and then just put in the property value to make it dynamic. That thing is done. And just double check this thing has been imported correctly. And the next job, I want to use that preloader. The reason is because we are loading images. If, say, for example, this image size is too large, it takes quite a long time, even the lazy loading is going to load quite a while. You probably want to show the spinning circle to make the spinning a while until all the images is ready. Okay, so that's why I use this preloader. This preloader component has been created in the previous two videos. We have used it a couple of times, so this is not the first time we use it. We're just going to import it. So we're just going to ask if the image data is ready. If it's not ready, we're going to show the preloader. Otherwise, we do the mapping. Okay, and we do the mapping over here. We map it into the gallery item, which is the child component that we created over here, and then we're just going to import it. Done. Okay, so now all the things has been imported with that item passed in as a property, and this property has been object destructed over here with all the data type defined over here. Okay, so the gallery is done. That's quite simple. So what we're going to do next is to import this one into our home page. So we have our gallery component. Just double check it has been imported the correct position. Yeah, that's all good. And then we're going back to our current project. You can see this gallery has been successfully built. If you click on one of those, you will see this thing pop up as a model, and you can click on the arrow button to do the image carousel. And there's a cross button on the top corner. You can close it off by pressing that one, but even you don't press that one, you can click anywhere to close it off. This is the beauty with the GlightBox. It's a really handy tools for you to quickly build a model on the image gallery on the hidden items inside any kind of project. Alright, if we build these things with the CSS or vanilla JavaScript or the React JavaScript, it's going to take quite a few lines of code. But with the GlightBox, everything has been handled under the hood. Beautiful. So this thing's done with that cool zoom in effect with that image gallery all finalized. Okay, so now where we're up to. We have done our gallery, and now we're up to the last section, which is going to be our contact. Oops, and also one before that is going to be our chef. The chef one is going to be a quite simple one. It's like an introduction for your team. So I'm just going to build this one real quick because as you can see, there is no swipers, and it's just going to be some hover effect that pops out the chef's detail, and also with the section title. So 3 images and a very simple data mapping. So think about it, are we going to build it as a server component or a client component? Actually, we can build this chef one as a server component because there's no interactions between the user and your DOM element. So we're going to build this one as a server component. Let's just do it right now. So to create our chef section, what we're going to firstly is to create a new file called chef. with the plural TSX. So in our section folder, and then RFC to have the boilerplate. And then we know that it's a similar logic as you have been building many sections. You should know that the next way of creating a project, you need to look at how many child components that we're going to have. The section itself contains the whole thing, the title and the body of the section, and in which we're going to have a card, right? This is a card to hold each individual chef. So we're going to have to build a chef card on a chef item to hold each one's portfolio. So back to our editor inside our component folder. Create a new file called chef item tsx. So that's RFC, and then we know that we're going to have some styling for it. So that's going to be chef item.css. So import that CSS back. Chef item.css. So that thing has been imported back. So now we have all the template ready. The next job is that we're going to start it from the chef item first, because we know that eventually the data is going to be fetched at the parent component but mapped into our child component, right? So each child component is going to take a property called item, and after you do the object structuring, we have to define the item's data type. And we know that if you look at it, how many properties we're going to have the name of the chef, right? We're going to have a photo, which is the image routes, and also the position of the chef in the restaurant. And yeah, that's pretty much. If you want to have some animations, we're probably going to set up some time delay for each one. So this one comes in first, and then subsequently this one, and then eventually this one, right? So you can set up some delay time for it, so you can control the CSS. But what I will do, I'll give the ID for each, and that is going to be a number. And then the second one, this is going to be a semicolon. And the next one is going to be the name. And that one is a string. And the one after is going to be a photo. And this one is going to be a string as well. And this next one is going to be the position. And this one is going to be a string. So the last one, I'm going to have a delay property, because I want them to have some animation effects when it pops out from the DOM, right? I don't want them to come out all together. I want them to have comes in one after another with some delay time. So that's what it is for. So once you've done that, we pretty much have this all set. The next job is to put in our chef item template. So like so. So what it does is that we create a 4-column template or a 6-column template on the middle screen, and give a class name of member. This data AOS is a animation libraries. I'll show you later on. If you want your DOM element to be animated with some zoom in effect or some pops out effect, this thing is really handy. It's called animation, the animation on scroll, that kind of thing. So here we can set up the delay time for each item to pops in and pops out. And then you have your image routes for each chef. And then you have their name. And then this is going to be the social for each one. I didn't create a separate component for them. But ideally, if you want your code to be super dry, you can create a separate component for the social as well. Because each of them is actually, it's quite repeating over here. Each of them contains the social's name, the social media name, and also the link, right? You can try to do it on your own. So that's pretty much our template. So this one is done. And once it's done, we're going back to the parent component to start to think. Yes, we are going to build this one as a server component because there's no user interaction incurred. It's pretty much just for them to hover on. That's a CSS interaction, not some click events, right? So we can do it as a server component. And the second thing to think about is where the data come from, right? The data is supposed to come from our data file. So open up this one, and then down here, what I'm going to do is to put in our chef data, like so, with the ID, the name, the photo routes, the routes of the images, and also the position. There's a delay, that's 0.1 second, 0.2 second, 0.3 seconds for them to have that kind of a delay animation. So once we have the data, we know that we need to create a backend routes for the front end to fetch data, right? So in the API folder, I close out this one and this one as well. What we're gonna do is to create a new folder, and that one is going to call the chef. And we know that in this one, we have a new file called route.ts. So that will be used to create to hold our API endpoint. And inside here, it's quite simple. Firstly, we import the data from the static data file. This is like how you connect to your database. And then we create a get routes for them to respond the JSON data onto our browser. If this thing has been set up correctly, when you go to your API endpoint and you go to chefs, it's supposed to show you all the data that you have right? And the next job, we're gonna make the GET request from this API endpoint. This is a RESTful API, and our job is done. So we close up the data and the routes, going back to our chef. Remember in the previous session, I have shown you the differences between the client component and the server component. Because we are building a server component, the beauty of it is that we don't have to create any use effect or use state hook. What we're going to firstly do is to create a synchronous function outside this export, the functional component, create this get chefs data, and we know that we are fetching the data from localhost 3001/API/chef, and then once we fetch the data, it's asynchronous, we're going to return it as a JavaScript. So response.json is to convert the data into JavaScript, right? So because we are using this asynchronous function, so here on export, we have to turn this one to async function as well. Quite simple, right? And the first job in that chef function is going to call this data fetching function, right? So here we say item is going to be an array type of data. We're going to await this function to be called, right? Once we get a result, this thing will be automatically stored into our items. So here you can see you don't have to set up a local state variable to store the data, because all the data will be created and fetched on the server side and stored automatically into your variable. This is a local variable, but it is not a state variable because the state is not going to change, right? If the state of the is going to change on your DOM element, you have to make it a client component. That's the rule. So now the next thing is just going to be very simple. I'm going to put it in our section template over here. Instead of that, we say this. So now we have our section title. We haven't done this millions of times. I don't want to explain again. Just import it, reset the property of it. And then the key thing is that we have the items ready, and we just want to check it's ready, it's not an empty array, and then we do the data mapping, map it into the item. And we know that each sub item is going to be the chef item that we built it over here, and each chef item is going to take the property of item. That's why we popped in over here, right? You must assign a unique key to each mapping item. This is the React rule. So here we're just going to have to import that chef items. So now everything has been done correctly. As you can see, really cool, huh? So the server component actually runs really fast. You don't have to wait until all the documents to be sent to the server, to the browser, before the data can be fetched. The server component build everything ready on the server side and put it straight away to the browser, right? So this is really fast. However, it does not allow any user interactions or state change. And the next thing, if we go into the browser, oops, I haven't imported yet. If we go into the page, we're just going to quickly inject our chef below that gallery. And then we're going to see this one looks all loaded. Data is correct, but have you found any problems? Is that we don't have that amazing hover effect, and that is because I have not put in the chef's items starting file yet. So very quickly, I'm going to put this in. And the chef, for each member, we give them a background and also the margin. And for the margins info, this is going to be a pseudo element. We set it to cover the entire card. And for the content, we just need to regulate its position. For the title, make sure you have the correct font and weight. And for the span, the same thing. You just have to make it italic and also display it as block. For each social, we're going to make the position absolute, make them align properly, give them a certain hover effect to show that theme color, on and on and on. Right, so it's a quite standard CSS. You can go through it yourself. It's just that for the member hover, we give a background of a linear gradient. This is going to have a linear effect of the background shadow. Alright, so after all that done, make sure the CSS file has been linking correctly without any typos. That's all good. And now we're going back, finger crossed. This thing will look much nicer now. As you can see, when you put your mouse on the chef, that details popped out. And with this amazing gradient effect, because the bottom part is going to be darker and the top part is going to be more transparent, right? So that looks all amazing with a hover effect. But this is a server effect, or this is a server component. Really cool. All right. So now we have pretty much finalized most of the sections except the last one, which is the contact. So very quickly, what I'm going to do is to go into our folder, close off these few things, and to create a contact section over here. As a practice, I'm going to give you the UI template for the contact section. If you want to make it work in a React way or the Next way, you can practice on your own side. And because we have done the booking table before, you know how to handle text change, how to handle input box, how to handle the form validation. And the same logic apply here in the contact, because the contact also contains the contact form, right? So I'm just gonna give you the UI template. If you want to make it functional, you can practice on your own. So real quick, I'm gonna create a new file called contact.tsx, enter. So that's that, RFC, to have a boilerplate ready. And also, in the same folder, we create a new file called contact.css, enter. So now I just want to link these two together, import contact.css. So that's done. The contact section is going to be quite standard. I didn't have any data to be fetched from the backend. That'll make it easier, because this is purely taking the data input. However, in consideration of the contact form, we do need to create a backend route as well to take the user's contact detail, because we need to make the post request to the backend, right? Very similar to what we have done in the previous session for the booking table, right? If you understand how to make the post request for this booking table, you should be able to finalize your contact form on your own, right? But here I give you the template for that UI, so we can have the complete project. And I will quickly explain for you. Entire contact comes in as a section with the ID and the class name both equal to contact. And all the things going to be wrapped inside a container for the title. So we're just going to import a section title component. We have done this many times. And after that, we have a fade up iframe. This is from the Google map. So if you have a specific location of your business and you just need to jump into Google and choose the share, and then you want to embed it, this one, the entire iframe can be downloaded or copied from Google Maps straight away. You don't have to type in a single word. Except for the styling, you probably want to turn on the object, because this is not the typical way of writing styles. We are writing styles inside the JavaScript. And for the next job, it's going to be our location. All the things must be wrapped inside a container with a row. And also, each row contains two parts. So the first part is 4 columns. The second part contains 8 columns. So you add up these two together, that's 12 columns, which is made up one row. Okay. The first 4 columns contains the company's info, your location, and then your operating hours, and then your email, and then your call, and your phone number. The second 8 columns is going to be our form, which is this one, and it's also the key part of your contact form. And you can see we create our form here and give the class name contact form. And then inside it, we're going to have a row to contain those input box. We already know how to handle those input box from the previous booking form, so you should be able to handle it again, right? So this is a very similar, exactly the same logic. You have your name, email, and the subjects, and all the stuff. Of course, if you have created a separate component for your input box, you can just load your component here straight away, right? And down the end, it will have our send message button. Okay, that's how you build up the entire contact form section. Really simple. And then to finalize that, we just have to put in our contact.css, and to make that form looks better, save. So we're gonna have a contact info 100% width with the icon. We want to make sure it has the correct background color with the correct height and width. You want to make the correct font to the title, to the paragraph. This is just finalizing your forms and the form group. You have some validation and error message. Make sure you have the correct color for them in red. If the message has been sent successfully, you want to put that CSS on. You want to make sure the background shows in green. If you want to have some loading effect, this is the animation for the loading spinning circle as well. You have those things. For the input and the text area, we want to style it correctly. So that's for the placeholder. For the input and text area focus. So when you click on those things, it's going to show that same yellow color. For the submit button, we want to start it in the most sophisticated way. Make sure that when you hover on it, you have that theme color on, right? So this everything has been set up here. I have shown you this contact.css in full. If you want to have them on your own, you can pause the video and type up. And make sure that you link this contact in. It looks like that one is in. And we're going back to our page, home page. The last job is just to put in our contact. See, this one has nothing to do with data, so that's why it's much quicker to build it. It's just gonna be a React template. Contact, import, close that off. So now if we're going back to our current project, you can see, because I'm based in Brisbane, so in Australia, so that's why I use my current location. However, you can put in any location you want, just to get it from the Google map. And here you fill up your own details, and here you have all things. See, this is the focus effect. If you click your mouse into one of the input box, the border will change to the golden yellow, which is our theme color, right? So that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's the contact section with the message leaving. One more last thing for us to think about is going to be our footer. If you look at the original project, in the footer, we also have this amazing footer that shows the details of the company with some useful links and services, and the newsletter subscription button and area. And also down here is going to be our subfolder that shows the copyright thing. Okay, so now let's just jump into the last part of the section building to finalize this footer. To create a footer section, in the section folder again, we create a new file called footer.tsx, enter, and then RFC to have that boilerplate ready. And then at the same time, in the same folder, we have a file called footer.css as well. And quickly import that thing back. Alright, so now those two files has been combined. And the footer section is going to be quite easy because it's just going to be a UI template without incurring any data. So I'm just going to put in this. As you can see, everything has been wrapped inside the footer tag with an ID of footer. However, the footer does contain two parts. One is the footer top. The other one is going to be the container that wraps the bottom of the footer, which is a subfolder that contains the copyright thing. Okay, and in the footer top is also going to be another container, and inside here is going to be a row, and each row contains 4 parts. That's the column of 3, column 2, column 3, and column 4. Okay, so all these things add up together equals to 12, which made up the entire footer. And we can see in the first column, first part is the info that contains your business details, and also the phone, the email. This is the social link for different social medias. You can put in the link over here. And in the second part, this is the column 2, which contains the useful link. It's actually another second navigation for you to go back to any place you want. And also in the third column, it actually contains the services that your organization can provide. Alright? And the last column is the newsletter with the title and a paragraph. It's a very small form over here. You can create a click event to submit this form that will allow the user to put in their email address and subscribe to your newsletter. Right? As you know how to make the post request in our previous session in the booking table, you should be able to handle this as well. Just gonna have to create a post request to handle this form submission. Okay? After you've done all this, it's the subfolder that contains the container with the copyrights and also the credit. That's all. Okay, the footer template is quite straightforward. And the next thing is for me to put in the footer CSS, like so. So the footer CSS is going to have a background of black with the color white. The footer top is going to have this kind of a setting with some border to the top and a border bottom. Make sure you have the padding set up correctly. And also for the title, has a correct font size. Make sure it's transformed to uppercase. And also for the paragraph, make sure you line up with the font size. The social link. The social link should have a hover effect that shows the theme color, which make it beautiful. And also for other things, it's just the setting of the font size, the title, the footer link, everything. Okay. So I'm just gonna quickly scroll down to let you have a look at all of these. For the form, just make sure you have that correct margin and give some border radius to make it a rounded corner. And also for that input box of email, make sure you have the width correctly set up. And also the submit button with the background color of yellow, with the hover effect of dark yellow. Pretty much this is gold. And then this is the subfolder setting for the copyrights, the credit, and also the anchor link. Alright, so that's all the settings for the footer. And now the footer is done. The next question is, where do we put this footer? Do we put the footer in our home page? No, because we are building the multiple page website. Remember, if you look at the original one, the menu actually allowed the user to go to another page, which also have the footer ready. Okay, so we are building a multiple page website. And to do so, you want the footer to be shown on every single page the user allowed to go. So the best place to put a footer is going to be our layout. Above that back to top button, we're just going to inject the footer component. So in that way, we have our top bar and header and footer wrapped our children component inside. So the footer will be shown on every single page. Alright, so once we've done that, we're going to our current component, current project, and you can see the footer has been correctly put in. If we're going back to our menu, and then we're going to a certain one, as you can see the footer is still there, the top bar's there, and the header's there. Alright, so in terms of the project, we have done everything, finalized, the back to top button is still working. And one last important thing I want to highlight, and I want to show you, is this navigation setting. Because so far, if you click on one of those navigation buttons, it goes to nowhere. This is incorrect. It's supposed to take the user to the section that you just click on. How do we do it? Let me just open up the editor, close off these things, and this one as well. So we wanted to go to the component and open up the navigation. In the very first video, the first session, if you haven't looked at my previous session, please go back to watch the first one. We have set up the template for the navigation, and here we have done the on-click events for the navigation button that allow the user to go to the target of the section. And the on-click events, this one, handle scroll to, has been left empty over here. And also, whichever section the navigation moved to, that navigation should have shown a different color with the theme color yellow. And this is the navigation active segment. So we have to handle the navigation active status over here, right? So now since we have finalized all the sections, we are ready to write these two functions, which is also the key of this project. Let me show you. So for the handle scroll to, it actually takes the section's name that you want the user to go to, right? If you look at the navigation data that we have, so let me just find out my data file over here. So we build our navigation at the very beginning over here. Each navigation object having a target property, right? That tells you which is the target of this navigation once you click on it. So we're going to use that to find the target, right? So back to our code. This section refers to the target that you want to go to. As you can see, we put in the navigation target here. And inside this code, what we're going to do is to handle the moving. How do we do that? We're going to do some traditional finding of the section. Say, for example, let's create a scope variable. This let means that this header only belongs to this function. It's going to be an HTML element. We're going to use the document query selector to find the header element. That's like the traditional way of the JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript, right? And once we find the header, we're going to find the offset height, which is the top of the header, right? And then we're going to create another local variable, scope variable, which is also a HTML element, using the query selector to find the section target. We put this hash key over here, and then we're going to concatenate the section name. So if you're in a hero, because each section has an ID, we know where it goes to. If you look at our section component, say for example this about, each one will have an ID. So to select this section, we're going to use that hash and about, right? So this one, as long as we know the section name and put in the hash key there, we can select that entire section. And once we found that, we assign it to the target element, right? However, we have to think about, because we are building the multiple page website, only on the home page this section thing should work, right? Only on the home page once the user click on the navigation, it should go to that section. But what if the user is on a different page? Say for example here, if you click on the navigation, it should take the user back to the home page and move to that section as well. So we have to do an if statement here. If the path name equals to the slash, that basically means that we're on the home page, we do this part. Otherwise, we do this part. And how do we find the path name? The path name is actually one of the built-in module inside the Next.js. So what we can do here is we can use that path name, import two things from the Next.js. One is the use router from the Next.router navigation, and the other one is the use path name from Next.navigation. So we're going to import two more modules from the Next navigation and use them to find the path of our application. So here down inside this function component, we're going to create a local variable called the path name and make it equal to use path name, right? So in this way, you actually just use this module. The Next.js will find out your path name route straight away for you. You don't have to do anything, right? And then another one is because we're going to redirect the user to the home page. If the user is on the second page, we're going to create a one called a router, and that one is going to equal to use router. So we'll import these two things. So now you have this ready for you. And then down here, we're just going to check if the path name equals to the home page. If it's yes, we're going to create a element position equals to the target element offset top. Offset top will find the top position of your target section. And then we're going to use that window scroll tool to scroll to the position of the element position minus the offset, right? Because we want to minus the offset of the header's height. Otherwise, the header will take a part of that section. It's the incorrect position. And I want the behavior to be smooth. However, if the user is on a different route, not the home page, we want to push the user to the home page and go to that section, right? This is the way. So we've done it correctly, and then let's just move back to our current project, reload it to see if it works. I click on about, it goes to the about, and that thing will take into consideration of the header's height. This one gets been taken off, right? If you don't take it off, this one will be sitting at the very top, and the header will hide a part of it. It will overflow it. And then we go to manual, it works, special, it works, and everything, see, gets all linked up correctly. Beautiful. Even when we go to a second page, it will still allow you to take you back to the about. No problem. However, you might notice one thing. If we go to about, the navigation active status still set to true for the home, not about. If we move to the about section, the about navigation button should turn to yellow, and the home one should turn to white. This active status has not been reset while the section is moving. Why is that? And that is because we have another function called handle navigation active. We haven't done anything for this one yet, so now I'm just going to write the function code for this one and explain it for you. This one is actually quite a complicated one. First, we're going to create a local variable, a scope variable called position, and that is going to be our scroll position plus 200. The scroll position we have defined in our first session that whenever the user scrolls the window on your browser, and we're going to use this use effect hook to add an events listener to record our scroll position. So this state variable scroll will be changed whenever the user have a scroll behavior on the browser, right? This thing has been changed instantaneously. And now we're going to our function. Whenever we have that scroll position, we add 200 to it. This is going to be our current scroll position, right? And then the magic thing happens is that how do we change that active status? We want to write a map function to our nav list data, the nav list data, which is this one. As you can see, by default, only the home page, the home button has been set to true. That's why it always shows yellow. The remaining active has all been set to false, right? We want to change this thing based on the user scroll position. So firstly, we're going to map it, all the active status to false, and then we create a local state variable, which is the target section, using that query selector. We found our target section, and then the next job is going to do a measurement. if our target section has been found, and if our current position is greater than the target position of that top, but less than the target position of that top plus the height. Plus the height basically means that this is the bottom of our target position. So you found the top of your target section, and you found the bottom of your target section. You want your position to be in the middle of these two figures for that navigation active status to be turned to true. Am I clear? Right? So you have to find the range of your section. This is the top of your section. This is the bottom of your section. As long as the current position is in the middle of that range, I want my navigation active to be set to true. So once you have done all this setting, you return that nav and use this set navigation list local function to update the local status of your navigation value, which is this one that we have set above. Okay, so this is a quite complicated mapping. Hope you could approach it. And once you've done that, as you can see, this one has been showing fading away. We never have a chance to use it. How do we use that? And the way to use that is to use that a React hook, like so. So whenever the user scroll on your browser, have a scroll behavior, we're going to trigger this handle nav active. Remember, this handle nav active is based on your scroll position. Whenever the user scrolls it, this thing changes, scroll position changes, we're going to trigger this function, and so that the function can find the most updated position of your browser and to see which navigation should be set to true. Okay, so that's the logic. So once you've done that, you're going back to our current project and you reload it. If it goes to about, you can see this about changes to yellow, and the home button has been set to white, and the menu the same thing, special the same thing. So this all working all correctly without any problem. Beautiful. Okay, pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty much how we're gonna build this project. And not only this is a full screen application, if you turn on the mobile view, you can see this is automatically responsive. Not only we have done heaps of settings in our CSS, but also we use the Bootstrap. The Bootstrap allows the mobile responsive setting because you use that container row column thing. It'll wrap your application straight away for you. You don't have to worry about so much. It saves you a heap of code to write stuff. And the navigation is also working on the mobile view as well. It takes you to the special. Okay, so now that's pretty much the entire project. I hope you like it and enjoy it and learn quite a bit of things from it. If you do like my tutorial, please subscribe my channel, click on the like button and share it with your friend. If you do have any questions or comments, leave it down below and I'm more than happy to answer your question. Thank you all for watching my tutorial, and I will see you in the next video to show you a more creative and amazing project. Bye for now.